There's research that shows that doing an 8-week foot strengthening program reduces the risk of getting a running injury over the course of a year by 250%. It doesn't guarantee you're not going to get injured, but it reduces your risk by 250%. And I say over a year because that's how long the study was. Well, like I mentioned before, there's other research showing you can get the same benefits of that exercise program just by walking around in our shoes. So I'll say to people, look, if you're happy in your running shoes, wear them. But then as soon as you're done running, get out of those and into something like these for active recovery and building strength. We have a WNBA player who called us and said, I've been wearing your shoes and your sandals when I'm off the court, and my feet and ankles have become indestructible. You guys should make a basketball shoe. So we already had done that, actually, and we sent it to her, and she called back and said, I couldn't sprain my ankle on these if you paid me to. So there's a time and a place for everything, but the more time you can spend letting your body be naturally healthy and strong, the better.
Steven, welcome to the Superhuman Life.
Frank, thank you. It's good to be here.
Walk me through what's going on in your head when you're standing there in front of Shark Tank.
Yeah, wait.
And
you could have just stopped at walk me through what's going through your head, and I would have said that's a bad idea. But all right, sorry, my apologies. Finish the question.
You're standing there in front of Shark Tank, on Shark Tank, and you're presented with $400,000 investment into your business. Yeah. What's going on, and how do you walk away from that?
What's going on in my head was, well, that's ridiculous. And I just went to the next shark. Because when we were on Shark Tank, and just if people want to look it up, I'll tell you the best place to find it right now. Go to the CNBC YouTube channel, and they have a thing called Shark Tank Misses. And I think we were the first Shark Tank Miss that they published. And so you won't see the beginning of our episode where we're running around bouldering with me and my wife. But at the end, it says, we turned down this $400,000 offer, and last year we made $33.6 million. So when we were preparing to be on the show, and we taped that 9 years ago, we talked to a bunch of bankers, we talked to a bunch of people who bought shoe companies, who sold shoe companies, investors, and we had a really good sense of what the value of our company was. And so Kevin said he'd give us the $400,000, that's a lot of money, but he wanted 50% of the company when we were offering him 8% of the company. So it was such a non-starter that Lena and I, my wife, we literally forgot he made the offer. And a little while later, Robert says, there's an offer on the table. And we both kind of looked at each other and went, oh, that? Oh, yeah. Now, here's my favorite part. So the show is edited, all right? And there's things that end up on the cutting room floor that you'll never see. And this is my favorite. So Kevin says, here's this offer. And my wife says, so are you bringing anything to the table other than money? And Kevin says, well, I'm a smart businessman. I got a big Rolodex. And I hear my wife say, so nothing? And she doesn't remember saying that, but I vividly remember that because we wanted someone who had experience in the thing. So turning down the money was easy because we knew that it was just so undervaluing our company that it just, again, it was a non-starter.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it clearly has been the best decision. You said that was 9 years back.
Actually, it was 9.5. We taped it in July of 2012. It aired in originally January 2013, and then again June 2013, and then on CB whatever channel it's on, and then CNBC has been CNBC has been doing reruns ever since. So, but they just did this Shark Tank Misses thing because we have been named as one of the most successful post Shark Tank companies, deal or no deal.
That's incredible. Yeah, no, right, yeah. Well, congrats. So, how early in the business were you guys on Shark Tank? When did you start Xero?
Yeah, again, we taped, it was 2.5 years into doing this. So we were tiny. And all we were selling then was a do-it-yourself barefoot sandal making kit. And so it was really fun. It's based on a 10,000-year-old idea. You just, cut out actually at that time, you could either cut out it from a piece of rubber or get a ready-made foot-shaped piece of rubber, and then you lace them on your foot. Because footwear for the majority of human history has been something to protect your foot, something to hold that onto your foot, maybe some insulation if you're living somewhere cold. So that was the original idea. It was just something that would allow you to basically get the benefits of letting your body do what's natural. And I know some people will argue and think that they can't do that, and we can talk about that, but just getting the ability to let your body do what's natural and still be able to get into a restaurant without having to argue about whether it's legal to be there with bare feet. It is, by the way, or not piss off my wife who was tired of me walking in with my dirty bare feet onto our white carpeting.
What percentage of the time are you barefoot now versus having the barefoot style shoes on?
It's a good question. It used to be like 90% of the time. And now, because we have so many different shoes that I'm always testing, it's closer to 50-50. I mean, when I'm at home, always barefoot. When I'm on the track training, I'm a Masters All-American sprinter. So when I'm training, I do everything up to full speed in bare feet. And then I put on one of our shoes. In the summer, I spend a lot more time barefoot. I used to do all winters, mostly barefoot in Colorado too, which is crazy, but I was just kind of curious, like, is it doable? And the answer is yes, if you're not stupid, if you don't just like go for a, hour-long walk in bare feet on ice. But if you're attentive to planning where you're going to go, where you're going to be warmer, less warm. But also the thing I discovered is that the circulation of my feet changed. So I go out now walking the dog who's wandering around here with me. My hands and my face get freezing cold. My feet are always fine.
Do you ever get any pushback or challenge as, I don't know if you're active CEO, but founder of a shoe company being barefoot half the time?
Yeah, when people say, "Wait, you're barefoot, but you own a shoe company," I go, "Yeah, because our shoes give you that same all the benefits of being barefoot, letting your toes spread because that gives you better balance and agility and mobility, letting your all the bones and joints of your feet move because you have a quarter of the bones and joints of your whole body in your feet and ankles, getting that feedback from the ground, so your brain knows what you're stepping on or stepping in, so it knows how to move you better. All those things are really important, and we designed our shoes to give you as many of those benefits as humanly possible, while still giving you something that again lets you get into restaurants and grocery stores and Whole Foods and whatnot.
Yeah. Now you said, I think, 99.9 or 99.97% of, human history, shoes have been protected, right? Peace here covers it. It's not this performance thing. When did this begin to change? And what was the reason for things changing?
It's a really good question. So up until there's a researcher who used to be at Harvard. She's now at the University of Southern Florida, named Dr. Irene Davis. And Irene says it best. She says, in the 60s and 70s, if you remember, we were playing basketball in Chuck Taylors and we were running in really thin-soled running shoes. And we weren't seeing the number of injuries, the kind of injuries, or even the severity of injuries that we see now, thanks to the advent of the modern athletic shoe. So on a panel discussion I was on with some guys from Brooks and Adidas, she said, and by the way, I said Adidas because I'm pretentious. That's how Europeans say it, because that's really what it is. It's Adi Dassler. But anyway, if you're in the footwear business, if you're really pretentious in the footwear business, you just call them Adi. So save that for a dinner party. But she's, so she asked the guys from Brooks and Adidas, she says, so what problem were you trying to solve? So we didn't see one. And why isn't it working? Because runners in particular, the injury rate for runners since the advent of the modern athletic shoe is over 50% a year. Over 50% of runners every year get injured. And that hasn't changed since about 1974 with the modern athletic shoe.
Professional runner, or what's classified as a runner?
Anybody who's running.
Anybody that's out there running. 50% of the people that take a step in the direction considered running end up getting hurt that year.
Yeah, professional runners, fewer injuries actually than recreational runners, in part because it's actually interesting. There's a coach, I'm not sure I can mention this. There's a coach who's currently being investigated for basically beating his runners to a pulp. And his coaching style is, I get the best of the best, and then I just work them and see who falls apart and who doesn't. And the ones who don't, they're going to be my best runners, which is not often true. There are often many, many good runners that if they weren't just beaten up like that would have tremendous careers. But that's his style. So professional runners, fewer injuries than recreational runners. And there are a number of reasons for that. But let me back up to answer your question. Why do shoes look the way they are? Most people don't know this. And you can read you can read Swoosh, you can read Shoe Dog, you can read any book about the history of running shoes, and they won't tell you this. But it's kind of common knowledge in this circle. When Nike was just getting started, Bill Bowerman was in a building that he shared with some, I don't remember if they were orthopedic podiatrists or sports podiatrists. Either way, some podiatrists. And he walks in and says, I got a bunch of new runners getting Achilles tendonitis. What do you recommend? And they said, well, clearly their Achilles have shortened from wearing higher heeled dress shoes. So you need to make a higher heeled running shoe, like put a wedge of foam in to accommodate that. Because if you look at the original Nike waffle trainer, it looked a lot like our shoes. It was flat. It had just a little bit of foam, and that's really it. And I remember
that Forrest Gump shoe, right? That's the one that you're referencing, is what Forrest is wearing in.
No, I'd have to look and double check. Maybe not. It's not a great shoe. It's not as good as it could have been because it was still too pointy. It squeezed your toes together, which is not good for you. But in terms of, like flexibility, lightweight, low to the ground, flat, it did. So then they came up with this idea, make a wedged shoe to accommodate this shortened Achilles. So you end up with something that looks like this, okay? So now I'll come back to this shoe in a second, but let's cut to the chase. 30 years later, one of these doctors is at a track meet with a friend of mine, a guy who worked directly with Bowerman for decades and who tried to get Nike to make shoes that worked the way human feet work. And he said they've never done it and they probably never will. Actually, there's a shoe behind me that I designed with this guy. Anyway, he's at a track meet with one of these doctors and he says, so your idea for the elevated heel, the padded motion controlled running shoe, that was your idea. And the guy says, yeah. And he goes, it's now ubiquitous. I mean, every modern athletic shoe uses that fundamental design and has for about almost the last 50 years. What do you think about that? And the doctor says, biggest mistake we ever made. We didn't have any evidence for this Achilles shortening thing or that a wedged heel would be an improvement. We were making a lot of prosthetics, so everything we saw was with a prosthetic lens.
Yes.
You know, if you have all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came up with this elevated heel, which caused problems. Basically, it made it so that you could land on your heel when you run with your foot out in front of your body. So there's two interesting things about that. If your foot's out in front of your body, you're basically putting on the brakes every time your foot hits the ground, and now you have to re-accelerate. If you're landing on your heel's a ball and it's unstable. So now you have to build in motion control, which can't work because the foam that they use for doing that, how much do you weigh?
250.
Okay, if you weigh 250 and you're a casual runner, you're hitting the ground with between 500 and 700 pounds of force. There's no amount of foam that can handle that amount of force. Breaks down the moment you start using it. And then, I mean, it goes on from there, but just, the landing on your heel with your foot outstretched, putting on the brakes with your leg relatively straight. Harvard's Daniel Lieberman showed that when you land on your heel like that, it sends what he calls an impact transient force spike, a really rapid acceleration of force that goes straight into your joints, instead of using your muscles, ligaments, and tendons as not only the natural springs and shock absorbers, but joint protectors that they're made to be. Dr. Isabel Sacco in Brazil took a bunch of elderly women, 65 plus, who had knee osteoarthritis and put them in shoes similar to ours. And within 6 months, their pain was either reduced so much that they weren't taking pain medication or eliminated. And many of them, their osteoarthritis went away because they stopped walking with their outstretched heel or their outstretched leg heel first. And they started using their muscles, ligaments, and tendons, which took pressure off the joints and let the joint heal. Now, this might sound crazy to someone unless you understand how they research knee osteoarthritis with animals. They take a rabbit, they extend its leg, and they just keep hitting its heel, which puts force into its knee joint and hip joint until it gets arthritis. And if they want to test a drug to see how the arthritis goes away, what they do to test it against the rabbit is they just stop hitting its damn heel, and the knee osteoarthritis goes away. That's what they compare it to. So we're doing the same thing. Runners are doing the same thing. And now we're sitting here with a shoe. Here's the thing about modern shoes that make no sense to me. Pointy toe box. I don't know where that came from. That one's a mystery. So it squeezes your toes together, which means you can't actually engage your arch, which is really strong if you let it be. And you don't do push-ups with your fingers squeezed together. You let your fingers spread because that gives you better force production, better balance. Same thing with your feet. So last story about Bowerman and the shoe design. There was a running coach out of New Zealand named Arthur Lydiard, arguably the most successful coach in history. He coached everything from the 800 meters to the marathon, and his runners were practically indestructible. His runners won more Olympic and World Championship medals than anyone else I know of in the same kind of time frame. Lydiard said to Bill Bowerman about the new shoe that looked kind of like this. He said, and by the way, Lydiard made shoes for his runners that looked like ours because he was a shoemaker when he wasn't coaching. And so we have a lot of Lydiard runners. Anyway, he comes up to Bowerman and says, those new shoes of yours, they're going to kill people. And Bowerman's response was, the way it was told to me was, yeah, but we're selling a shitload of them. Here's the kicker on this. We have heard from high-level people at every major shoe brand some variation of this natural movement thing that we do with Xero Shoes, totally legit. But we can't do it because it would be admitting we've been lying for 50 years. They know that the modern athletic shoe causes injuries. And if that sounds crazy to people listening, I'll tell you how we know they know. Nike put out a study 2.5 years ago, actually coming out on 3 years ago, where they tested a brand new running shoe they had developed against their best-selling road running shoe. And the way the study was publicized was that new Nike shoe reduces injuries by 52%, which it did. But then you have to look at the actual numbers, which have not been published, but I have a copy of the study. And you'll hear why it hasn't been published. So the best-selling shoe in a 12-week study designed by Nike, over 30% of the people got injured in 12 weeks. In the new shoe, only 15% got injured in under 12 weeks. How is that good? Imagine you walked into a running shoe store and you said, I'm looking for a good running shoe. And they said, all right, here's one. It's our best seller. 1 out of 3 people get injured within 12 weeks. Oh, no, 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 no. Don't you have anything better than that? Okay, well, here's another one. Only 1 out of 7 people get injured within 12 weeks. Geez, don't you have anything that doesn't injure people? No. You walked into a running shoe store. Now, we can't make claims, medical claims, about injury reduction or things like that. All I'll say is look at our reviews. In fact, I just edited a video, or just looked at an edit of a video that we're about to do, where here's the hook. It says, I know this sounds crazy, but it's literally illegal for me to show you many of the 61,000 reviews we have with an average of 4.8 stars, because there isn't a medical study using our shoes that proves or says what hundreds of thousands of our customers have said they've benefited from when they wear Xero shoes. I mean, it literally pains me that I can't show you these reviews. The only way I could do it is if I redacted them like they're top secret, documents like this, and then I show a bunch of redacted reviews where it's just all bleeped out on the reviews. And I go, it literally pains me that I can't show you those reviews. It hurts my feet, my ankles, my hips, my knees, my back. There's something caught in my eye. So, my lawyers flipped out when I showed them that video. They went, well, it's not illegal to say it, so go ahead. Anyway, that was a long answer to why do shoes look like this and what the problem is. And again, here's the last thing I'll say about this. Probably not. We know that the running shoe companies have a problem. And this is not true just about running shoes, but we know they have a problem, and we know they know it because there's a multi-billion-dollar industry about things to put in your shoes to make them work better. The shoe companies have been doing this for a while. They know what that stuff is. They could build that in. They're not making money on the aftermarket products like orthotics and insoles, et cetera. So why don't they just do it? And the answer is the fundamental design causes problems. End of story.
What is it about the design that's causing the problems? Is it creating, because of the way that the shoes are designed, the pinching of the toes, the support, so it becomes structural? Or is it because the foot now is not able to operate in the way that it is designed?
Those are one and the same. So, the elevated heel, in addition to, making it so you land on your heel, which people now think that's the way you're supposed to run, but it's not. And when people sometimes will pull out video of professional runners, they go, well, that person looks like he's landing on his heel. It's like, you can't use video analysis to determine it. If someone's running like 3 times faster than you are, their heel might touch the ground first, but the force actually hits when they're landing midfoot. But more importantly, these are professional runners who are trying to make as much money as they can while they can still run to support themselves and their family or their village. If you're not a 105-pound Kenyan, I don't care what a 105-pound Kenyan is doing. So who runs 3 times faster than you do or more. So the elevated heel, in addition to making you unstable and landing on your heel and sending force up your joints, when you lift up your heel, that messes with your posture. It tips you forward just a little bit, but that little bit puts pressure on your knees and your hips and your back. This thick sole, in addition to, well, you have 200,000 nerve endings in the soles of each foot. That's not an accident. That's so your brain can tell what you're stepping on or stepping in, so it can help you move better, to adjust to your terrain. And it has to be able to respond quickly. Some of these things are reflex arc things that don't even make it to your brain. They go to the spinal cord, the base of your spinal cord, and right back down. Like if you step on a bee, your brain doesn't have to tell you step off of it. That's a spinal cord reflex where you hop off of it really quickly. So, but all this foam here that's supposed to cushion means you can't feel anything. That ain't good. And by the way, this is going to be a research thing. Cushioning doesn't actually cushion. It makes it so you can't feel the force, but the force is still going straight up into your body. And there's a lot of research on this, that cushioning doesn't reduce impact forces. In fact, because your brain can't feel things, it'll sometimes make you land harder to try to get some feedback. So then arch support, this is the other biggie. Arch support, if you break your arm, I'm not saying if you break your arm, because I don't want you to break your arm. If you, for some reason, have to have your arm in a cast, it doesn't come out stronger 8 weeks later. Because if you keep a joint immobilized, all the tissue around it doesn't have to work and it gets weaker. Like, people go to space, they come back, it takes a while till they can walk again because the muscles atrophy so quickly. Same thing if you're in a hospital bed. So same thing with your foot. The research is unequivocal. If you put arch support in the shoes of healthy athletes so they don't have to use their feet, They lose up to 17% of the muscle mass in their feet and strength in their feet in under 12 weeks. When is weaker ever better than stronger? As far as I can tell, never. Good answer. So that's another one. The other thing, that motion control part, again, we already talked about that. You can't really even do that. It doesn't work. Pronation. Some people will say to me, well, my doctor told me I pronate. Good. Pronation is actually a natural part of the gait mechanism of your lower leg if you're not hyperpronating, if you're not doing it too fast and uncontrolled. But pronation is just a natural thing. When you land, if you're running in bare feet or naturally, you land on the outside of your foot, that's supination, and it rolls into the inside of your foot as you come off your big toe. That's pronation. And you'll see that in the ankle. That's natural. So there's literally nothing in the design of the modern athletic shoe that's good for you, that's proven to reduce injury or improve performance. Now, some people say people are running faster now. They look at Eliud Kipchoge, who ran the marathon in under 2 hours in a pair of Nike shoes. Kipchoge came out about a year ago with an article where he was saying, it was my legs, not my shoes. And it's true. I mean, this guy is a freak of nature, and it's him that did it. In fact, that Nike shoe, they say it's got a rocker bottom to help you go from your heel to your toe. But then you watch the video of Kipchoge and all the guys pacing him in a perfect marathon course. And for at least the first half of the race, they never touch the heel of that shoe. They're landing on the ball of their foot. So the whole design, it's just hand waving. It's just not, what people think it is. Um, and sorry, last one about this. Getting off Nike's case for a second. So Brooks does a thing. They have their run signature program. The idea being that everyone's a unique little snowflake and you need one of 3 different kinds of shoes. And they do a little thing to check how you squat and have you run in socks on a treadmill, not barefoot. They don't want you to think you can run barefoot. And then they prescribe a shoe for you, a type of shoe for you. Well, the Army tested this theory to see if it made a difference in performance or injury. And they just gave one group of people, I think it was about 900 people, got the appropriate shoe, quote unquote, appropriate shoe. And the other 900 all got the same shoe. Guess what the change in injury rate was between the 2 groups?
Nothing.
Correct. 0. People know this. The people at the big shoe companies know these things, but they can't change because it would be admitting they've been lying.
Are you familiar with GOTA training? It's like a new concept training out there. So this is how I've known about the barefoot or the minimalist. Is it barefoot technology or like minimalist shoes, or are they different?
So actually, that's a good question. They are different. So many people will say, I tried barefoot running and it didn't work for me. And I say, oh, did you actually have your bare feet on the ground? They go, oh, no. I go, oh, then you didn't try barefoot running. They go, well, you call your shoes barefoot shoes. I went, I don't do that. Other people came up with that idea of barefoot shoes. And that was the first phrase that people used. And as a search engine marketing person, I needed to use that phrase to make sure people could find me. But then minimalist kind of came out of that when people decided to not use the word barefoot. But the problem is the quote minimalist companies from the big companies, according to Irene Davis's research, weren't minimalist enough. They still had enough padding, enough cushioning that your brain couldn't get the feedback you needed and then would not engender the. So let me back up. It's not about the footwear. It's about the form. If you run with the right form, it's the best thing to do. But when you're in shoes like the modern athletic shoe, it's really, really, it's almost impossible to, because even if you land on your midfoot or the ball of your foot and let your heel come down, with the elevated heel in a shoe like this, your foot isn't coming down far enough. Your Achilles is a spring, and you're not getting the most bang for the buck out of that spring because you're getting in the way of using it. So the idea about a minimalist shoe was, let's get rid of a bunch of stuff, but still make it seem like a regular shoe. And according to Irene Davis's research, most minimalist shoes are worse for you than either barefoot or regular shoes, because they still have too many things in the way. They still typically have pointy toes, a little too narrow, too much cushioning, etc. So what happened in the very early days, in late 2009, early 2010, is the big shoe companies thought they were never going to sell another shoe because everyone was just going to start running barefoot. Because when you run barefoot, and I'm not suggesting that you necessarily do it for anyone who's listening, it changed my life because I was getting injured nonstop for the 2 years after I started sprinting again. And running barefoot, I found the form problem that I had that I couldn't feel in regular shoes, and it corrected itself naturally, because when you're running barefoot, doing it wrong hurts a lot, and doing it right feels great a lot. You can always spot a barefoot runner from like 50 yards. They have this weird look on their face called, I think it's called smiling. it's just a good time. So anyway, bottom line is, in Irene's research, she identified basically 3 brands that make shoes that are giving you that barefoot-like experience, but still some protection, still some extra traction, still some insulation, et cetera. It's us, a company out of the, pardon me, out of the UK called Vivo Barefoot, and then some, but not all of the Vibram shoes, the 5-finger shoes, which had those things fit my feet, I would have never started Xero Shoes, but they never did.
Guy, you actually asked a question that was given to me from a very, very close friend. I didn't have to ask it, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with like one of the lower off brands. You can find them on Amazon, Witten, Whitin.
Oh, yes.
I'm a fan of them. So this was my early introduction. It actually brings us to the Goda that I had brought up. So I was at the gym. I'm a bodybuilder, like 6'3", 250. Like, yeah, that's how big. Like, so my background is in hypertrophy, getting as big, strong as I could possibly be. I walked across the stage for 10 years. So that's kind of like when I'm in the gym, that's how my brain thinks and operates. About a year ago, I'm here in Tampa at our powerhouse, and I see one of the trainers in there. Every day he's got his clients like crawling on the floor. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? And then he takes them off the floor. Then he's doing this like ankle thing with them, high ankle inside out low or something. He's teaching them to like grip. I went to one day, I was like, I need to know what it is you're doing over here. You have caught my attention. I'm interested. We get in this conversation. He's got this certification called GOATA, GOATA, greatest of all time athletes. And what they do is they take people back to the foundation of how our feet are supposed to grab the ground, spin it, twist it, and catapult you off to where it's almost like every strike is like actually a strike, grip, push. And I spent 6 months working with this gentleman. Like literally, I had to humble myself and be like, I'm not going to be the big alpha bodybuilder anymore. I'm going to take my shoes off. I'm going to crawl in the gym. Steven, this has changed my life. Like it literally changed the way that I walk. It changed the way that I do stand, changed the way that I squat, everything. As somebody that for the longest time struggled with ankle mobility, I couldn't get in the hole unless I was elevated up on a platform. I can squat down there, no pain. I can literally sissy squat, knees to the front, touch the floor, spring back up, zero pain in my knees, ankles, anything. So that was kind of my introduction, but it was into those Wittens. So you're saying Wittens are not a good shoe?
What I'm saying is, everyone we've ever heard who said, "Hey, I got those Wittens because they were cheap," right?
That's like $40.
Yeah. So 2 things. One, everyone we've ever seen who said, "I got the Wittens and they're great," we sent them a pair of our shoes, and they call me and go, "Dude, I had no idea. I was completely mistaken." They're typically not wide enough. And they don't last as long. So our shoe is going to, like one of our shoes, our Prio, it's our best-selling shoe, is twice the price. Except we have a 5,000-mile sole warranty. So the net cost is way less because those things you're going to blow out of those things more quickly. And what happened about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, was some internet marketer knew that going after barefoot running and barefoot shoes was a viable thing, and just took a bunch of Chinese companies that were making water shoes and rebranded them as barefoot shoes, and then took a bunch of Scrabble tiles out of a bag, and that became the name of the company. So they're doing really well on Amazon. They got a lot of reviews. Some of them are real, and many of them are. It's an inexpensive shoe, but it's not made nearly as well, and it's not as biomechanically correct. So had I thought in advance, I would have gotten you a pair of these before we had this conversation, and you would have said, "By the way, I had these Witten shoes, but holy shit, dude!" So it'll happen after this.
Yeah, no, and probably maybe one of the things that has saved me is I'm not like a big runner. I've used them for the training in the Goda and all these things. I know, yeah, I'm looking forward to trying.
Well, so in fact, here's the thing. Whether you're a runner or not is kind of irrelevant. What you just said is the most important part. Your feet are your foundation. Strong feet are not only good for your feet, but good for every other part of your body. Because, in fact, we have people who ask, well, what do I do if I'm on cement all day? I go, you wear our shoes. What do you mean? It's like, well, because you don't need cushioning to deal with the cement. You need your feet to be able to be strong enough and flexible enough to make these little micro movements to help you balance and do what you need to do. And then the rest of your body will align. If your feet aren't strong, your glutes can't be strong enough, and vice versa. You need strong glutes to get, it's a neat relationship between your glutes and your feet. But if you have stronger feet, you'll be better at deadlifting, you'll be better at squatting, you'll be better at running, you'll be better at walking, you'll be better at pretty much everything. And here's the fun part. Research shows that just walking in a pair of minimalist shoes like ours builds foot muscle strength as much as doing an 8-week foot exercise program. Now, the study was done with a different pair of shoes other than ours, but the person who led the study said you should get the same benefits with Xero shoes as the one we used in the study because they didn't have our shoes when they did the study. So, which brings me to a fun point. When it comes to the research, I call all the research on natural movement and barefoot, et cetera, the dumbest science ever done. Because fundamentally, all we're having to prove in a way that big shoe companies have never had to prove anything, all we're proving is use it or lose it. Let your body do what it's made to do is better than getting in the way. And if people say, yeah, but modern athletic shoes have improved performance, which I brought up before, um, there's some really fun research that showed that what's the name? Oh my God, Jesse Owens. Basically, if he was running on a modern track surface, would be almost as fast as Usain Bolt. It's the track surface. It's not the shoes. And Jesse was running with big, thick spikes in a cinder track surface and ran like 10 flat, 10 flat. There's a guy, Delano Merriweather. He has the world record to this day in the 100-yard dash because after he ran it, they stopped doing 100 yards. They switched to meters. So this is 1971. He set the record. Delano, he wasn't even a trained sprinter. He just liked to sprint while he was in medical school. He just would go out in the track, entered a race, set an American record, and so he ran a 9 flat 100 in 1971 on a cinder track with the shoes that they made then. That equates to about a 9.8 if he was running the 100 yards. And if he was doing it on a modern track surface, probably a 9.7 or so, which would make him one of the top 5 fastest men in history.
Yeah, to say that it's because of the shoes. I mean, every aspect of training, from what we understand, training modalities, performance, the access to facilities. Then you get on the other side of things, the recovery. These athletes are recovering better so they can train more frequently. They can recover better from a race, and now they can be prepared for the next one. Nutrition, sleep, hydration, sleeping in hyperbaric chambers. Like none of that has a cause on maybe some of the improved performance. It's solely the shoes. Yeah, there's
another one, which is just the value for being a celebrated athlete, for being a world champion athlete. There's monetary value that didn't used to exist. I mean, there was no professional athletics in the 70s, really. I mean, nothing where you could make a living off of it. And so once it became the kind of thing where you could take yourself or your family or your village out of poverty, the pool expanded. The number of people wanting to do this thing expanded dramatically. So now you're getting the cream of the cream of the crop, which before it was just whoever had the time and money to do it. So it was a bunch of rich white guys back in the 60s and 70s.
Are you guys in the kids infant space? Like you would assume that, right? I mean, if the shoes are shaping our feet, we want to start from as early as possible, getting them in the right type of footwear. I know toddler shoes are kind of like these little, like they're just socks with maybe some designs on it. But once they start walking, like now they're getting these closed toe boxes. So have you guys broken out into that space?
So right now we go down to about a youth size 11, and we're going to be going down even further. The challenge with making shoes for kids is that they cost about the same as it costs to make shoes for adults. So we're having to redesign the shoe and work with factories that are more hip to what it costs to make shoes for kids. And the other thing is that kids, of course, wear through them more quickly. So you can't sell them for the same price, even though they cost about the same to make. So we're working on those two problems as we go lower and lower. For babies, I mean, they don't really need anything, frankly. For toddlers, you're absolutely right. Back to Irene Davis, she made the comment that if we just had kids wearing shoes like ours, then in 20 years, we wouldn't be treating adults for the billions of dollars worth of problems they have with their feet, ankles, hips, knees, and back.
Yeah, and I know another problem with kids here. I'm just thinking like here's a crazy idea. Run with it, doing it. What you want is create like an exchange type of program, right? Because if your shoes last for 5,000 miles, you do. Okay.
Yeah, so we have it. So we have a Xero Shoes kids buy, sell, trade thing.
Yeah.
But back up to kids. If you want to see something really sad, it starts out happy, ends up sad. I remember being on a track not too long ago, and there was a bunch of like 4 and 5-year-olds, and they were running around in bare feet or in like super thin little shoes, and they had perfect running form. They were landing with their feet underneath their center of mass. They were smiling. They had just the right amount of body lean, so they didn't have to push so hard because you don't want to push off the ground. You want to kind of just lift your feet off the ground, like backing up to stepping on a B. You don't push harder to get off the ground. You just lift your foot by flexing your hip. Same idea. They, again, had that smiley thing on their face. In fact, they ran laughing until they were done. Then they'd lie down. Then they'd get back up and do it again. And then you watch those same kids a couple years later when they've spent a year in regular shoes. Doesn't look fun, not so much smiling. Their form is degraded. I mean, it's horrible. And now the irony is, if you took them out of their shoes, they'd go back to the way it was. And the bigger irony is, same thing for us. It just takes a longer because our brains aren't as malleable. Our neuroplasticity isn't quite as high as when we were little children. But I was in the lab with Dr. Bill Sands, who used to be the head of biomechanics for the U.S. Olympic Committee. And we just saw that 9 out of 10 people, if you just get them out of their shoes and into bare feet, their gait changes almost immediately to something way, way better biomechanically than what they were in shoes. And that other 10% needed just a tiny bit of instruction till they were doing the same thing.
Yeah, there's a good place to maybe zero in a little bit more, kind of get tactical with people here. So guys listening to this, they're like, got this now. My feet are hurting all the time. I'm waking up my pain. I got, plantar fasciitis in the heel. They hurt at the end of the day. If they're curious and they're going to begin to now go and get into the barefoot, what's the steps? Take your shoes off, go start running. Like, do you go 50-50 wearing the barefoot and then the other shoes? How's that transition look for somebody?
So the first thing is you want to think of it like going to the gym if you haven't been for a while. You're not going to pick up where you left off. You're going to back up and do less. So you want to think of it like that. You want to start small. So Adidas came up with this idea when the whole barefoot thing was kicking off in 2010 for transition shoes. So if you've been wearing something with a big, thick heel, just go a little lower, a little lower, a little lower, a little lower until you're ready for those other shoes. That doesn't work. So what you want to do is you want to go kind of cold, whatever the opposite of cold turkey is, I guess, hot chicken. I don't know.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Well, kind of. So what you want to do, here's the instructions that I give if somebody wants to learn we'll use running, but it's true for walking too. Take off your shoes, find a nice, smooth, hard surface, some sidewalk, bike path, etc. The white line on the side of a road, if it's a freshly painted white line, that makes barefoot runners just teary-eyed. But smooth, hard surface, because that's going to give you the most feedback. And you don't want to run on grass, for example, because that's just like taking the cushioning from your shoe and putting it all over the planet. Plus, there's things you can't see in grass that you don't want to step on or in, divots or worse. Now that I have a dog, many things that are worse. And so anyway, shoes off, smooth, hard surface, go for a really short run, like 20 seconds, tops, and then wait and see how you feel the next day. If you're a little sore, like when you haven't been to the gym for a while and you just do a little too much, wait till you're recovered and then do that 20 seconds again. When you can do that and you feel like you just want to keep going and you feel fine the next day, add 10 more seconds the next time, and then 10, and then 10. Just build it up slowly, and you'll find that it builds up pretty quickly. Now, if you are a 5-day-a-week runner, you can do this at the beginning of your run and then just switch back to your shoes, do whatever the hell you want. And eventually you'll find that you might be able to do one of those 5 days totally barefoot or in shoes like ours. And then eventually you just kind of build it up. So you're titrating. There's not a simple answer because we are all unique little snowflakes in certain ways. Some people can't feel the ground very well because they've been in shoes that made their brain not pay attention to their feet. Some people can feel things and they can tell if it hurts or not. Oh, that's the instruction. Sorry. The big instruction, short run, see how you feel. If you're not having fun, do something different till you are. If it hurts, do something different till you're having fun. And I'll say more about that in a sec. Some people, again, can't tell if it hurts. They literally their brain has changed its shape so much that it's not receiving the input from the feet. The idea there is walk around barefoot on mildly unpleasant surfaces like pea gravel or just a good sidewalk even. Some people can tell if it hurts, but they don't have good proprioceptive skills. They don't know where their body is, what their body's doing. You tell them to put your arm parallel to the ground. They, reach like they were trying to answer a question in school. I'm exaggerating, of course, but they need like a video feedback so they can see that what they think they're doing is different from what they are doing.
Yeah.
I had someone say, hey, the sole of your shoe, the heel of the shoe, that material is not really good. You need to replace it. I go, you're overstriding and heel striking. They go, I don't do that. I teach running. I know that I don't do that. Really? Send me a video. So the guy sends me a video. It took me 20 minutes for him to see that he was actually overstriding, putting his foot too far in front of his body and heel striking. And then the next thing he said was, yeah, but I don't do that. I said, dude, it's a video of you, by you, sent by you. I mean, I don't know who you think it is. And I've seen that a few times. So some people just need a little video feedback or someone who can watch them and give them some feedback. And I'll say more about proper form in just a moment. Third group of people, they can tell if it hurts. They have decent proprioceptive skills. They need some cues just to speed up the learning process. Things like try to land with your feet behind you. It's not possible. But if you try, you can do that. Or exaggerate what you're doing wrong. Reach your feet way out in front of you so you can feel what that's like. But what you ultimately want to do is land with your feet mostly as close to your center of mass, underneath your body as much as possible. You're going to land on your midfoot or your forefoot. You're going to engage, it'll engage your arch. You're going to let your heel come down to the ground naturally as it needs to. And you want to lift your foot off the ground instead of pushing your foot off the ground. So think about lifting from your hip bending instead of pushing from your toes flexing. Another thing you want to do, another cue, is pick up your cadence just a little bit. Don't run faster, but have a few more steps per minute. Because if you are overstriding and heel striking, for example, and you pick up your cadence from, let's say it's 150 steps per minute to 155 or 160, it's going to be harder to overstride and heel strike because you don't have as much time with your feet on the ground. So picking up your cadence is just a good panacea. It's a good thing that'll, take care of a bunch of things. You want to have just a little bit of forward lean in your body from kind of like from your ankles. There's no magic to that one. It's just that you don't want to be totally upright, really. And you want to have your arms, keep your thumbs up by your armpits, because the faster your arms can move, the faster your legs can move. And if your arms are way too far down, it's a longer lever. If you got them up by your armpits, that's helpful too. So, but I'm going to give you my favorite recommendation because I just realized that by the time people are hearing this, there's a new book that will have come out called Born to Run 2. And if people know the book Born to Run, which catalyzed this whole natural movement, Born to Run 2 is the ultimate training guide. Each chapter is an exercise you can do that helps you get proper, better form to make you a happier, healthier runner. And there's an app that goes with it with videos that show you how to do all those things. And happily, the guy who wrote Born to Run, Chris McDougall, and his training partner and running coach and now co-author Eric Orton, they called me and said, there's a footwear section of Born to Run 2. Do you want to send us some Xero shoes? We can see if we like them enough to put them in there. And we're now partners with them. This is the first time they've ever endorsed a shoe in 13 years. And we're even going to be making Born to Run shoes along with them. So, so we're proud to say their whole goal is to get people to learn to be happy, healthy runners in Xero shoes.
Love that. Congrats. I don't know why, Stephen, I want to ask you about pedicures, but we've been talking about all this barefoot, walking across gravel and on the street. I am somebody like, I enjoy a good pedicure. I just want my feet to look presentable, to be soft on the bottom. But if I'm out there running in gravel and things like that, it's gonna. Yeah. So, do you get pedicure, or are they a bad thing?
No.
Like, I don't know why I'm asking.
No. So there are a couple of things, and I'm going to say something that you in particular will like. So again, we make Xero shoes for when barefoot isn't appropriate, essentially. So it's getting cold where we are, and a lot of people aren't going to try and be barefoot in the snow. So we have a snow boot that's up there somewhere. We've got a trail running shoe with a grippier tread for trail runners. People walk in all of our shoes. People hike in shoes. We have hiking shoes as well. So we're here for when barefoot isn't appropriate. Many people think that if you're running around barefoot, you're going to end up with these big, thick, calloused elephant-like soles of your feet. It's not true. You meet a accomplished barefoot runner, and while the skin may feel a little bit thicker, it's not enough that it's providing, the kind of protection you get from a shoe. But they're really sensitive. They're hypersensitive often, and they're hyper flexible. And they're not all calloused and blistered. Calluses and blisters mean you're applying too much horizontal force into the ground in some way. Like if you have blisters or calluses on the ball of your feet, that means you're pointing your toes, but landing with your foot in front of your body. If you have calluses on or blisters on your toes, on the tips of your toes, that means you're pushing off. You're kicking your feet back instead of lifting them off the ground. So it's a good diagnostic. My wife likes to say that our shoes are just coaches. If you listen to the feedback, they'll tell you everything you need to know. So pedicures, I get them every now and then, and they are delightful. I often will do it when my wife says, pedicure. But here's the part about, there's a couple things that make pedicures wonderful. One is it just feels really good. It's nice to have someone pamper you.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know what happens? Do you know what happens with neural remapping when someone loses a limb? You're going to love this.
No.
Okay. If you lose a limb, the nerves that were going to that limb, your brain basically tries to remap so that there's a different part of your body that's using that part of your brain. So if you lose an arm, it's not uncommon for the brain map to change to your cheek. So if you stroke someone's cheek, it could feel like you're stroking that now missing arm. Guess where the nerves remap if by chance, and God forbid this ever happens to anyone that we know, if your penis was removed?
Don't say your feet.
Bingo. So, and here, the way they discovered that was a guy who had gangrene of his penis. I don't even like saying that phrase. and they had to remove it. And suddenly his feet became like hypersensitive and orgasmic. Now, if you think about it from when we were embryos, at a point we had little hand buds and little feet buds, hand buds coming out of where your shoulders are going to be, feet buds coming out of where your hips are. And then they just extend and they become arms with hands at the end and legs with feet at the end. So there was a time in our development where our feet and our gonads were right next to each other. And there's still a connection between those two. So when you're going to get your pedicure, you're basically seeing a hooker.
Interesting way
I thought
to
you'd find that interesting.
analogy there with, I shared with you the audience out there. I mean, God, I want to ask a follow-up question. That's probably it's probably inappropriate, but I'm gonna ask it anyways.
There's nothing inappropriate. You're talking to the wrong guy for inappropriate.
Is this have anything to do with like why some people have a foot fetish?
I would say yes. I don't know that there's research showing that, but you came to the exact same conclusion.
Right? Yeah.
It kind of makes sense.
I mean, every woman loves her feet caressed and rubbed. I mean, there's God, yeah, we go way down a rabbit hole. Let's get back to shoes here. You mentioned a three, right?
Too close to home.
I'm just thinking of the audience. I don't want to take them somewhere out there today. You mentioned the three: Xero, Vivo, and then the Vibram, the fingers.
5 fingers.
The 5-finger shoes. What are the similarities and what are the differences in Xero in comparison to the other two brands?
Well, compared to 5 fingers, the difference from Xero is they won't prevent you from getting laid. So whenever, in fact, Dave Asprey, the Bulletproof Coffee guy, he gave us a review. We made shoes for him, and he's like, now he got out of 5 fingers, and now he's wearing our shoes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he says, Dave. Yeah, he said, I used to wear those toe shoes, otherwise known as male birth control, and now I don't, and my dating life has improved. So literally, the thing with those is they're not necessarily made for everyone's foot shape, and that's problematic. So that's the biggest thing. Vivo Barefoot, similar products. They're typically more expensive, and they do a lot of more high-end stuff. We do more performance stuff. We have compared to any brand, we have just a broader selection of shoes, boots, and sandals for casual and performance use than any other minimalist company.
Yeah. Now, if the objective and goal with the shoe then is to mimic barefoot, do you wear socks or do you go barefoot into the shoe?
Personal preference, I'm barefoot, in part because I'm lazy. If it takes me extra time to get out the door, I'm not going to do it. So just the way it is. This is going to sound funny, but it's a common thing with sprinters. We're all lazy. We just want to do, the shortest, fastest thing we can get away with. Not for everything. Don't take that out of context. So if you are going to wear socks, you want to wear something really, really thin, so you're not, again, losing that ability for your feet to sense the ground and respond accordingly.
Recently, I've been a big fan of Crocs. Much like you, I'm lazy, very on purpose. They're quick, convenient. I can slide in, slide out. I don't have to tie. I can wear them everywhere I go. I can wear them to the gym. I can wear them to restaurants. Like literally, they're 90% of what I wear. Your thoughts around a Croc shoe?
I used to say
besides just being a clear fashion like staple.
Oh yeah, it is. Boy, if you want to tell people what your fashion sense is, then a pair of Crocs will let them know from a great distance. So my claim to fame used to be that I'd never worn a pair of Crocs, even though they're right down the street from us. I mean, literally, I could throw a couple of baseballs and hit them from here. But then someone said to me that I was lying, and I couldn't figure out what they were talking about. And she said, remember we did a sketch comedy short film and you had to wear a pair of Crocs and about how much you hated them. It's like, oh, right, that doesn't count. So the simplest thing I can say is that anything that gets in the way of letting your feet do what's natural is fundamentally going to be problematic in the long run. But in the short run, if there's a reason for doing something, there's always a use case for something. So whenever possible, you want to let your feet and the rest of your body do what it's made to do without getting in the way. And there's times where you need to get in the way. Now, some people might even think about like climbing Mount Everest, you need big, thick, heavy boots with tons of insulation. And then you look at what happened when Edmund Hillary climbed Everest the first time with his Sherpas. They were wearing like thin leather shoes practically. They did not have big, thick, giant, padded, highly insulated. So it's like, what changed? Which is a question I don't have a good answer for. So do what you need to do. Like I say to people, there's research that shows that doing an 8-week foot strengthening program reduces the risk of getting a running injury over the course of a year by 250%. It doesn't guarantee you're not going to get injured, but it reduces your risk by 250%. And I say over a year because that's how long the study was. Well, like I mentioned before, there's other research showing you can get the same benefits of that exercise program just by walking around in our shoes. So I'll say to people, look, if you're happy in your running shoes, wear them. But then as soon as you're done running, get out of those and into something like these for active recovery and building strength. We have a WNBA player who called us and said, I've been wearing your shoes and your sandals when I'm off the court, and my feet and ankles have become indestructible. You guys should make a basketball shoe. So we already had done that, actually, just as a test, and we sent it to her, and she called back and said, I couldn't sprain my ankle on these if you paid me to. So there's a time and a place for everything, but the more time you can spend letting your body be naturally healthy and strong, the better.
Is there ever a case where it'd be a bad idea for somebody?
We have a bunch of NASCAR drivers and Formula One drivers who like our shoes, but they can't wear them when they're driving because they need fireproof. So that would be a bad idea. Um, there, we don't make a shoe yet that is perfect for soccer, even though we have a bunch of soccer players who wear our shoes, but we don't have something that's really cleated, like big, thick cleats that you need on a muddy turf. So that's a place.
Outside of specific, maybe, professions or careers, certain's got a certain type of lingering injury, maybe anything in around that.
Let's just say if you have some actual deformity, this might not be the best idea. People will say fallen arches. I go, I used to have the craziest flat feet ever because I never used them because I've been wearing arch support since I was 12. But then I started doing this and now I have some arches. Arch height is predominantly genetic, but arch strength, that's a whole different story. I mean, if you're in the gym, there's guys, because they produce too much myostatin, they can get strong as an ox, but they never get big. And there's guys like Flex Wheeler, who was huge before he got strong. So, there's individual differences that you need to deal with. So if you have if you have an undeniable genetic or biomechanical problem other than flat feet or high arches, neither of which are actually a problem, then but that's a small percentage of the population. For the average human being, other than specific use cases, I can't think of any time where you'd be okay. In fact, I'll say it this way. If you're okay, even for a little bit of time being barefoot, then you'd be okay switching to this, as long as you, again, switch and let yourself get used to them slowly, like going back to the gym. Do a set, see how you feel. Once you're not sore, add a rep, add a set, add some weight, whatever makes sense.
How quickly, once switching, do you begin to feel better, experience any of the changes? And what are some of the first things people say when switching?
Well, the first thing people say when they put on our shoes, it's one of two things. It's either, oh my God, they're so light, it feels like I'm not wearing anything. To which I say, yeah, we've had people say they accidentally went to bed still wearing our shoes because they forgot they had them on. Swear to God. The other thing they say is, oh my God, my toes can spread. This is great. Now, I will say, if you have really, really, really wide feet, you can't make a shoe that works for every possible person. There's a big bell curve of sizes and shapes and volumes. But there's a weird thing about width. Most people, when they think about their foot width, they're using a two-dimensional measurement. But a shoe and your foot is both a three-dimensional thing. So we had someone come up to us at a trade show and say, hey, can I try on those shoes? I have a 4 double E foot. And I said, I'm not confident they're going to fit. And he put them on and they fit fine because it was wide, but it was also low volume. Conversely, I've had people with narrower feet that are really high volume where, we can't accommodate that. But we designed our shoes to fit 90% of the population as is. So the first thing you notice is how light they are. The second thing you notice is how your toes can spread, which is nice. The third thing you notice is how when you're feeling the ground, it's like getting a foot massage instead of feeling nothing, and that you're moving more naturally. The next thing people notice is their posture has often changed because they're not elevating their heel, and it just seems more natural. In terms of the time that it takes to feel all the benefits, that just depends on your brain, your body. And so for me, it was really like a couple of weeks, like maybe 2 weeks, because I just have really good ability to learn new movement patterns. I was an All-American gymnast. I learned how to tap dance to do research on cognitive aspects of motor skill acquisition. I tend to pick up new movement things pretty quickly. Other people, again, if your feet have been essentially numb, which makes them dumb for years, that can take a little bit more time. But here's the magic question. Let's go back to your arm in a cast, that analogy. If you take your arm out of a cast, you have two choices. do some work to make it strong so you can use it again for the rest of your life, or never use it again. Which makes more sense? Same thing here. If it took you 6 months to build the kind of foot strength and sensitivity and flexibility that allowed your feet to support you for the rest of your life, why wouldn't you do that if all it took to do that was walking around and doing a little bit of running maybe, and maybe some exercises you could do while watching TV? I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Love that. Yeah, I think my dad probably would fall into maybe the one category that you probably wouldn't be able to fit. He's a 6 double E or triple. Like New Balance makes 2 shoes in the world that will fit my dad's foot. And that's what he wears.
And what they do, those shoes, they're wide enough for the ball of his feet, but they still have pointy toes. So they still screw them up.
Yeah. He constantly is complaining about them. I'd be curious.
I'll tell you the thing I say to him. Our sandals would probably work for him might work for him because they're wider. And again, for him, the thing to do is just get out of those shoes as often as he can.
Steven, this has been fascinating, man. I feel like I could do a whole another hour with you and just explore probably non-foot shoe related stuff. Your brain is just a wealth of knowledge, man. Appreciate you, man.
Well, that's very kind. It's because I'm so old. They didn't have Ritalin when I was a kid.
Where can people find you, man? Where can they learn about the shoes? And then anything kind of big and upcoming, exciting? Obviously, you mentioned the book. I know that's not yours, but what's on deck for you guys here, in 2023?
Yeah, so you can find us at Xero Shoes, Xero shoes.com, although happily, because of a clever domain purchase, if your computer makes you type in Xero Shoes, it'll still get to us. We're on social media at Xero Shoes, /Xero Shoes, wherever you @ or /. We're also in the European Union at xeroshoes.eu. And we're soon, one of the big things that's going to be happening for us in 2023 is we're taking over xeroshoes.co.uk for anyone who might be there. It was an independent dealer who had that domain and was selling our shoes, and we're just taking that over for him. We release anywhere between 8 and 12 new pairs of shoes every year, or new styles every year.
Wow.
And the stuff that we have coming for spring and fall of 2023 are spectacular. We have a dress casual shoe. We have another kind of more casual, less dressy shoe. We have an upgrade to our lightest, most barefoot shoe. We have a new sandal for women. We have, I can't even remember them all. There's some beautiful things, which brings me to, we're in retail around the world too. We're in about 400 stores and in more almost every week. So if you go to our website, find the store locator, see if you find somewhere near you, REI stores, Dick's Sporting Goods, or Public Lands. See if you can find someone. If you can't, let us know where you are, and we'll reach out to the stores that are in your neighborhood. And we're on Amazon, we're on Zappos, we're at gear.com, we're at some of the other. Basically, if you search for us, you should be able to find us.
Do you recommend people try to find the retail and put a couple different shoes on and walk and kind of see which make and model of yours you feel best in?
Well, what I can say is I know people like to do that, and that's why we're trying to push into retail. But we also do free exchanges. So if you get a shoe and it doesn't fit, just wear it inside, see if it fits. If not, we'll do a free exchange. We want to make it as easy as possible for people, knowing that it's a tricky thing to do. And what we found just from research in the industry is that most people would prefer to go to a store and try on a bunch of stuff rather than just going back and forth and getting, new versions over and over. So that's why we're pushing into retail, despite the fact that the direct to consumer business online is just a much better business in general.
People don't like change, right? Like been buying shoes their entire life in a store, putting them on, having people tie them for them. It's hard to kind of break that in most people, at least.
What happens with us, and what happens in general, is if people get a shoe they like, then they'll just keep buying that online. So the online shoe sales numbers are out of whack because it's a difference whether you're replacing an existing shoe with the same model or trying something new. Once you try something new, you kind of get used to the brand, then it's a whole different story. So we often see people who will buy our shoes at REI or somewhere, and then if REI is not carrying our entire product line, which no store is carrying our whole product line, then they'll buy something from us. And once they get used to that, then they end up buying directly more often because it's just easier because they know how to find us. So it's that initial thing. It's that finding something new that it's more fun to do that when you're in a store, but it's doable online. Just, you have to endure maybe an exchange or two.
Yeah. Awesome, Stephen. Well, I appreciate your time. We'll get all those links plugged down in the show notes there below for everybody. So Stephen, I'd like to end every episode with the same question. Obviously, the title of our podcast is called The Superman Life. For me, when I talk about living a Superman life, it's really a belief system that I try to show up every day and live out. And it's a belief that we were put here for a purpose. But understanding or believing that there's a purpose or calling on your life is just the first part. You have to be very intentional about developing the skill sets to now bring that purpose to the world. For the good of everybody else, right? So that's what I believe is living a Superman life, but I like to get the guest take. So Stephen Sashen, as we close out today's conversation, how would you define living a Superman life?
Be curious and use fun as your guideline for whether it's working.
I love that. Love that. Guys, get out there, check out the Xero Shoes. We'll plug down the link there. If you got value out of this conversation, we've been thanking you every single week because we've seen tremendous growth over the last few months. And it's all because of you guys. So if you're getting value out of these, make sure to leave us a 5-star rating and written review. But if you know somebody in your life that is constantly complaining about their feet, maybe they had that weird stride. Maybe you know that their shoes after today's conversation is causing them pain. Do us a favor, but do them the blessing.
Hey, wait, I got to interrupt for you to do this because not just if your feet hurt, ankles, knees, hips, back, they're all connected. And sorry, wait, I got to do this too. I thought of another answer to your superhuman life question. Find a way to improve other people's lives just a little bit. And if you want to get rich, ask them for a little money in exchange.
Amen to that. And share this podcast with anybody that's complaining about pain anywhere in their lower body. Stephen Sashen, Frank Rich, we love you guys. We'll see you next week.